the thing that we're going to tackle in this coding session is we're going to tackle the process by which people come and go into the lobby. So what we want to do is we want to add the capability for our users to see other people coming and going into the chat room. So the first thing that we need to do is a little administrative upkeep. So earlier we had seen some discrepancies between people who had installed different versions of socket.io. And so I'm just going to start in my directory here. This is the code where we last left it before we started doing our lobby work. And if I run node server.js, server's running, we can come back here, we can hit let's play, enter a name, and send a message. And that's kind of what we got. And if someone else comes into a room, enters the room, and we say, actually, there we go. So that's our chat channel. Now I'm going to stop our server, and I'm going to look at what's in our directory, and I can see that there's several files. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to edit my package.json file. And what I want to do is I want to make sure that down here at socket.io, or wherever it is in your file, it should have a double quote, caret 2.0.1 double quote. Now, I changed it from the last time that we did our video, and so if you were following along with me, you might not have that number. That's the most recent version. So I'm going to save that package.json file, and then I'm going to run npm update to make sure that that most recent version of socket.io gets downloaded into my directory. It looks like I'm all set, so we're good to go. So that's the first piece of housekeeping, to update socket.io. The next thing that we're going to do is we are going to work with lobby, public lobby.html. We have a little bit of work to do to get this ready to be able to have people come and go from the lobby. Yes, a little bit of work. All right, so what work is that? Well, let's see. So here's our file that we're starting from. We need to do two things. We need to have a location where we can have our players be placed and removed from, so like a messages panel or something like that. So to match our prototype, I'm going to go ahead and put it here in front of our messages, and it's going to be a div tag, and the div tag is going to be a separate row. So it's going to be class equals, I'm trying to use single quotes, so single quote row align dash items dash end, and that's going to make sure that everything in this row is aligned with the bottom, vertical alignment is with the bottom of anything that's in the row. And I'm going to give this an ID so that we can reference it from the JavaScript and jQuery, and the ID is going to be with a single quote, lowercase letters, players. Close out that tag, close out that opening tag, and then create a closing tag so I know I'm going to have a matching pair. Now within that, I'm going to go ahead and create a column. And so I'm going to have a div, and the class is going to be equal to single quote column dash 9. That means it's going to span 9 columns in my 12 column grid. I'm going to put a space in and then do text.left to make it so that this column is left aligned. Single quote, close that div tag, and then I'm going to, within that div tag, use an h3 tag and say the word players, and this is going to be my header for the players that come and go into my lobby. And then close out that div tag, so that's the first column in my first row, and then my second column in my first row is going to be class equals single quote column dash 3, which is everything that's left. And actually I'm just going to leave this one blank because I'm just using it as a placeholder. Then I'm going to add another row. No, that's it. It's within this row that we're going to add all of our new players. So this spot right here, this is where the new people in the lobby are going to go. You don't have to add this. This is just a comment, but I'm putting it here so that you can visualize where those players are going to end up. And we'll leave the messages the way it is for now. All right, so that's our lobby.html file. There's one other thing we need to do to our lobby, and that is we need to upgrade and change our jQuery file. So if we come down here to the bottom where we're loading the jQuery script, you can see that the version of the script that we're loading is coming remotely from the jQuery website, and we're using 3.1.1 slim.min.js. This slim means that it's missing some of the effects, the animation effects. And in fact, we want the animation effects. So let's go ahead and correct this so that we have a version that has the effects in it that we want. So we'll go to jQuery.com and we will do download, and we will find the place where they have the script that you can link into. Let's see. We're looking for CDN from jQuery CDN provided by MHCID. Let's see. Here we go. I'm at code.jquery.com. I'm looking at jQuery core, and I'm looking 3.2.1 is fine. I don't want it uncompressed because that's unnecessarily large. I do want it minified, which means that all the space has been removed. So just to look at that, if you look at it, oh, actually it's not going to show it to me. It's just going to show me the code for it. All right, Slim has some features that we want removed, but I want it minified, but not with no features that are removed. And so it's going to give me the tag to add here with the source code fingerprint for security. I'm going to grab it using the copy button, and I'm going to go ahead back over into my file, and I'm going to, that copy didn't work. So I'm going to copy it myself. I'm going to come here and I'm going to drop it into my file, and I'm going to replace the previous version of jQuery here that was there from the Bootstrap template. Make sure it's all in one line, save it, close my jQuery window. And so that's the guts of the lobby.html file that I want to switch. Let me make sure everything is okay. Wait, for some reason that came back. Make that go away. Wait. There we go. Just make sure you get the right thing. 3.2.1 minified. Oh, there we go. I'm having trouble writing it. I'm going to force a write. There we go. Okay. And that's everything in my lobby.html file that I need fixed. Okay, I made one typo in my lobby file, so let's go back and fix that if we can. And the typo that I made was, instead of a line item end, it should be a line items end. And then as long as I've got double quotes in here, I'm going to go ahead and change them to single quotes. So on when I cut and pasted the code from jQuery, the line from jQuery, it had double quotes. I'm just going to make them single quotes. And I'm going to make single quotes down here on the socket.io include as well. This isn't going to change anything in your code. I'm just obsessive compulsive. All right. So that should be all we need for lobby.html. The next thing that we want to do is we want to work with main.js. Main.js will be the next place where we put changes. And we're going to go ahead and open main.js. So again, this is the client code that we run when lobby is first opened up, because we include it from lobby. So main.js. All right. So we go to the top of main.js, and the first thing that we're going to want to switch is right here where we say chat room. We're going to future-proof this a little bit, and rather than saying it's going to be called one room, we'll go ahead and default to calling it, we're going to default to taking the answer for what chat room is from the URL again. So right now, when we start the lobby page, the only parameter in the URL, when we come from the name page to the lobby page, is username. We're going to change that so that now sometimes we might pass it a game ID. But this isn't going to be for lobby. This will be so that we can use the same code in the future when we go to the game board. So we'll say that the chat room is going to be equal to whatever the game ID parameter is on the URL. And if that doesn't exist, so if we have undefined equal not to username but to chat room, so if the URL didn't have such a thing, then we will say that chat room equals single quote lobby. So this is very similar to what we had before, but instead of calling it the one room or whatever you had, we are going to call it lobby. That will future-proof us a little bit. Let's see, the next thing that we are doing is we're connecting to the socket server, so that's fine. That can remain the same. Possibly want to clean that up just a little bit. All right, then the next thing that we have is we have this function here. This is what to do when the server sends me a log message. This is just a comment so that we know what we're working with here. And then after that, we're going to add, we're going to work with this join room response, and we're going to change it a little bit. And this is what to do when the server responds that someone joined a room. All right, previously what we were doing is we were just managing the messages that were coming in, or we just made a message that said that someone had joined. So what we want to do is we want to do a little bit more work. So for starters, if we get a response back from the server after we try and join the room, and the server sends back our join room response, and if that failed, then we'll go ahead and leave the alert going up as it is. The other thing that we want to do is we want to say if we are being notified that we joined the room, then ignore it. We know that we joined the room because we just did it. And the way we're going to tell that is if the message that we got from the server saying who joined the room, if payload.socket_ID, if that equals socket.id or my socket ID right now, then we're just going to return. And close that off with a curly bracket. Oops, and that should be a curly bracket at the end there. Okay, good. So if we're being notified that we joined the room, we're just going to ignore that. All right, so now the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to fix the way that we're dealing with the chat messages when they come in. So what I want to do is I want to change the style in which we do this. And I'm going to do this by creating a new node for our DOM. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to, actually let's create some new HTML first. And the new HTML that I want to put in there is going to be a p tag, and I want to say the name of the person that just joined the room, so payload.username, and I'm going to append that with a plus to a single quote and say that they just entered the lobby. Then I'm going to put a close p tag within that single quote, close it with a single quote, parenthesis, and then a semicolon. That's going to be the HTML that I want to put into my document object model. Now I'm going to create a new node to put in there. So I'll say new node, and that's going to use the jQuery function, send it the parameter of our new HTML, and what that will return it will return a new node made out of that HTML. After I do that, I now have a node in my tree, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hide it. I'm going to make it so it's not visible, because when I add it, I want to reveal it, and I want it to appear like it just shows up. It's a nice animation when it appears. So it'll initially be hidden, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to append it to the messages section. So just like the code below it, I'll have $, single quote, #messages, single quote, .append, but rather than putting that text in there, which is almost equivalent, I'm going to put the new node. And I got a typo right there, new node. Now it's attached to my document, so now it's visible. It'll be rendered by the browser. And as soon as it starts being rendered, I want to say new node.slide down 1000. And that's going to animate it so that it's visible. And then I'm going to get rid of that previous line. So it's a little bit different way of adding that text to my document, and it's got a little bit of animation, so it's a little bit, it's a little bit cleaner, I guess. So this we'll call this with a comment. We'll say manage the message that a new player has joined. Okay, so that's what we do if we get our messages. Now let's add the row into our document demonstrating that someone has come into the room. So we'll put that in between here. So we'll say what we're going to do is if someone joined the room, if someone joined, then we're going to add a new row to the lobby table. So that's the place in the lobby.html file where we put the player's ID, the ID attribute with players. So first thing we need to do is let's get all of the elements that are associated with this player. And we're just going to get it just in case something is already present. So we'll say get all the DOM elements. This is probably going to be a selection. We'll use the jQuery selector syntax. And what we're going to look for is socket underscore single quote, add that to payload.socket underscore ID. That's going to search for all the elements in our document object model that have, oops, sorry, not socket. It needs to be dot socket. We're going to look for all the elements in our document object model that have the class of socket underscore and then whatever the ID number is of the person that joined. All right, now we're going to say, well, if we already have, let's see, I guess if we don't already have an entry for this person, then what are we going to do? Well, how do we test that? We say if DOM elements.length equals 0. So we looked for things in our row that were related to that person. They don't exist, and so it's 0. And so what we're going to do is we're going to add some new elements to our table that represent this. So we'll do it the same way we just did that style down below. We're going to create 3 nodes. Node A, let my computer catch up, node A, and that's going to be a brand new div tag. We'll create that node in jQuery, and node A will hold it. And in fact, we're going to need 3. We're going to need one for the W100 line, we're going to need one for the player's name, and then we're going to need one for the button. A, B, and C. Okay, so what's going to go into node A? Well, we want node A, we're going to add a class to that node. So this is the same thing as if we had done it in text in HTML, but we're doing it in a program in jQuery. What class are we going to add? We're going to add the W100 class, which from Bootstrap is a class that kind of puts a new line into our table. So we'll add that class, and we also want to add to this class, actually we're going to add to all of these the socket ID that we just got in so that we can find them again. So we'll say node a.add class. What class we're going to add? Single quote. We're going to add socket underscore single quote plus payload dot socket underscore ID. You got to make sure you get all these single quotes and pluses correct. In this case, we're intentionally not putting a period in front of here because period is how you reference a class, not how you declare a class. So we're going to do that with each of our nodes because we want each of them to have the name, that wanted them to be associated with the person that's joining. But node A, we're going to add the W100 class. And then node B, we're going to put the information related to Bootstrap. So we're going to want it to be offset-1, and we're going to want it to be column -8, or I think we did, yeah, actually, let's just do column 9, because that's what we did with the players. So column 9, and we're going to right align it so that it's over on the right by the button. And let's see, what else do we need to do? We need to add into the interior of this node, we want to append the name of the player. And so that's going to be single quote h4 single quote plus payload.username. So the server told us who joined, we're just going to add that in. h4 single quote plus payload.username plus single quote closing h4 tag. All right, so that's going to set up our A. Let's just make sure we got everything there. So node A got assigned the socket, and node B got assigned the socket, and node C got assigned the socket, and A got that, and B got that, and then finally node C is going to add the Bootstrap classes of column 3, and then we want that text aligned left so that they kind of butt up against each other. All right, good. And then in that last column, in column C, we need to put a button. So we're going to need to do this over and over again. So let's make a function that does this. But let's say var button C will make an invite button. In a second. All right, and then we will say node C dot append button C, so that'll put button C into node C. So we've got node A, node B, which has the username, and node C, which has the button C. Make sure you get capital letters correct. All right. Now we're going to hide each one of these nodes so that we can make them appear. Now we're going to add them into our players section here. So we're going to use jQuery, and we're going to say, okay, find the node whose ID is players, and then the action is going to be to append, got to spell it right, node A, lowercase, node A, node B, and node C, and then once it's being drawn, we're going to go ahead and say node A dot slide down, or make it visible with an animation, a slide down animation, and we'll do the same with B and C. All right, great. All right, now we assumed that we had a make invite button here, but we don't actually have such a button. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a function. Let's put it down at let's put it down at the bottom. Let's put it in front of our ready load function, and we'll make a function called make invite button. And what we're going to do on our make invite button is something very similar. We're just going to make some new HTML. So we'll say our new HTML is going to be equal to, and it will be a button tag. This is all just the tags that you need from Bootstrap. So button type equals, and now we're going to need to escape the single quote so that we don't end this string. We want the single quote to actually show up in the HTML. And we want it to be type button, escape single quote, class equals slash quote button outline dash primary, and single quote. And the text we want in the button will be invite. And then after we invite the person, then we're going to want to close the button tag. We're going to want to close that button tag, and that will be with button. And then we will close the string we're making with a single quote. That will give us the HTML that we want to add into our document. And so all of that should show up as a string color in your editor. Then the new node that we want to add is going to be equal to the $, the new HTML. So we'll convert that HTML into a node, and then we want to return that. All right, so that's a function down at the bottom of main.js. And if we go back to where we called it, up in the join room response, we make the button, and everything's good, I think. Let's see. All right, now for some reason we do have these elements in place, then what we're going to want to do is we're just going to want to, let's see, if these things are already present, if we already have a row for someone who just joined, we just want to make sure that the button node is correct. So let's say button C equals make invite button, make a new invite button. And then we want to find the place in our document where the existing button is. So we're going to use our $ and say we want to find the thing whose class is socket underscore payload.socket ID, payload.socket underscore ID. So that's the class of object that that's associated with the person who's joining our room. We don't want that. We want any of the buttons that are descended from it. So that's our rule for selecting a button that's descended from something of the correct socket underscore class name. And what we want to do with that selected thing is we want to replace that button with the button we just made. Replace with button C. All right, and then we want to make all those elements appear. Okay, so that is when someone joins, we'll create a new row and we'll make it appear. And if that row is already present, then we're going to just replace a button with an invite button in case there was some other button present. And we'll have it slide down, and then we'll manage the messages. Okay, so that's good. And so let's see what to do if we disconnect. So far, we don't actually have a message for what to do when we disconnect. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab all of the join room response code. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to put it as a new message right below. There we go. So in the version that I just copied, I'm going to create a new action. What to do when the server says that someone has left a room. So this is the opposite of join. Well, if there's an error message in it, we'll just alert and quit. And if we are being notified that we left the room, then we're going to ignore it. And otherwise, if someone left the room, then animate out all their content. All right, so what does that look like? Well, we need to find all the elements associated with their socket ID. That's that. That's good. That's pretty easy. And if something exists, so if we actually got something from that recall, from that selection, then we're just going to say make them disappear. So DOM elements dot slide up 1000. And then all this goes away. And if there wasn't anything there and they disappeared, then we just don't do anything. And then the last thing we want to do is manage the message that a player has left. And so we'll just say that player has left the lobby, and create the HTML, make it into a node, hide it, append it into our messages, and then make it appear slowly. All right, so that's good for, oh, and then we want to change the message that it responds to. This isn't a join room response message. It is a player disconnected message, which we haven't put into the server yet. Player disconnected. Okay. All right, so I think that's everything in main.js. What I would like to do is just go over and reload my file and make sure I don't have any typos in it. Let's see what we get. If we make sure that our, well, it's not going to work if it's not loaded. So we're going to run our server locally. And I'm going to run it to make sure I don't have any errors in main.js. And I do have an error. On line 86, I have an error. So I'll come back over here on line 86. And I see that, oops, yep, I have a extra parenthesis at the end of that line. So get rid of that line. Manage the message that a new player has joined. And since I copied that code, it's going to be right down here too. In player disconnected, I'm going to get rid of that parenthesis at the end. Save my file. Come on over and reload, see if I get any errors. Good, and I don't have any errors anymore. Oh, and look, there we go. I can see that a player has shown up in this lobby. I'm a little bit concerned because that, I thought that was me. Let me go back a second. Enter Don, and I'm showing up. I'm not quite sure why I'm showing up. Oh, I'm showing up because I haven't adjusted the server code yet in order to respond back who's coming in. All right, so the next thing that we need to do is we need to edit the server code to respond to the correct messages.